Welcome to Nadis Edit TV. We are now moving on Chapter 2 under Practical Research 1 and 2. K to 12 Basic Education Curriculum, Senior High School Applied Track Subject, PR1 and PR2. Tips on creating and crafting your Chapter 2. This will consist of 10 hours. Our competency for today is focused on the guidelines in crafting and creating your Chapter 2. Our lesson title is Tips for My Working Study at 2. Our learning objectives or our specific objectives. After the lesson, you should be able to 1. Determine the parts of Chapter 2. 2. Explain the parts included in Chapter 2. 3. Creates or crafts your Chapter 2, and 4. Cite the importance of each part of the research in your working study. So, let's dive into our lesson parts of Chapter 2. Tips in creating and crafting your Chapter 2. Under it, we have review of related literature and studies. The parts: related literature, related studies, synthesis of the state of the art, gap bridged by the study, theoretical framework, conceptual framework, and reference. Under parts of Chapter 2, the related literature. What is related literature? Related literature, or the RRL, is a detailed review of existing literature related to the topic of a thesis or dissertation. In a RRL, you talk about knowledge and findings from existing literature relevant to your topic, taken from https://www.editpage.com. So we are still in related literature. How do I write related literature? When writing the review, begin by providing the background and purpose of the review. Writing a literature review involves finding relevant publications, such as books and journal articles, critically analyzing them, and explaining what you found. There are 5 key steps. First, search for relevant literature, which is related to your topic. Number 2, evaluate sources. You need to evaluate your sources because sometimes it is not relevant. Number 3, identify themes, debates, and gaps. Number 4, outline the structure. And 5, write your literature review. Good literature review doesn't just summarize sources. It analyzes, synthesizes, and critically evaluates to give a clear picture of the state of knowledge on the subject. Okay, so we should remember that a good literature review should be arranged according to the variables. Also, it should be current and 10 years below. We are still in parts of Chapter 2, tips in creating and crafting your Chapter 2, the review of related literature and studies. Moving on to the next, related studies. What is a related studies? A good studies review should be arranged according to the variables and should be current and 10 years below. Related studies can be taken from diaries, speeches, manuscripts, letters, interviews, records, eyewitness accounts, autobiographies, empirical scholarly work such as research articles, clinical reports, case studies, and dissertations. We should remember that related literature and studies help the researcher understand his topic better because it may clarify vague points about his problem. It also guides the researcher in making comparisons between his findings and with the findings of other similar studies. So it is necessary that the related materials should have a true value. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 2, synthesis of the state of the art. Synthesis of the state of the art, it means to combine a number of different pieces into a whole. Synthesis is about concisely summarizing and linking different sources in order to review the literature on a topic, make recommendations, and connect your practice to the research. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 2, gap bridged by the study. Gap bridged by the study. A research gap is a question or a problem that has not been answered by any of the existing studies or research within your field. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 2, Theoretical Framework. A theoretical framework is a foundational review of existing theories that serves as a roadmap for developing the arguments you will use in your own work. Theories are developed by researchers to explain phenomena, draws connection, and make predictions. Taken from www.scriber.com. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 2, Conceptual Framework. A conceptual framework illustrates what you expect to find through your research. It defines relevant variables for your study and maps out how they may relate to each other. It is usually presented by visual format. Moving on to the next part of Chapter 2 is the reference. On this slide, this is a copy reference for Chapter 1. It is being discussed there. So we should remember that for more information about this reference, please watch Tips in Crafting and Creating Your Chapter 1 at Nadi's Educ TV, where reference is explained well.
Moving on, let's have an example of a qualitative research study. Unpublished undergraduate thesis from Bicol University, College of Social Science and Philosophy, Department of Peace Studies, Daraga Albay, Philippines. BUCSSP Undergraduate Research. The title, Discrimination Experienced by COVID-19 Patients in Castilla, Sorsogon. This is a case study submitted April 2022 by John Stephen D. Ludanco and Brian Edward D. Ludanco. Under example from Chapter 1, we move now to statement of the problem. The content of the statement of the problem, the general statement, the study primarily aims to determine the discrimination experienced by the COVID-19 patient at Castilla Sorsogon. Specifically, it will seek answer to the following sub-problems. So we have here 5 sub-problems. Number 1, focused on the context. What is the socio-demographic profile of the COVID-19 patients in terms of age, sex, civil status, occupation, length, stay in hospital or the isolation facility, and the history of infection? Number 2, what is the forms of discrimination that you have encountered being COVID-19 patient? Number 3, what are the effects of discrimination in their emotional and mental being? Number 4, how do they cope with the discrimination experience? This now is the process and the measure. Number 5, what are the lessons learned in relation to the discrimination experience because of being a COVID-19 patient?
Let us now analyze the related literature of this study. What you see here is an excerpt from the aforementioned study of the Ludanco brothers. What you see here is the review of related literature and studies. This chapter provides the general statement, which discusses the purpose of the chapter, which is under Chapter 2. Here, analyzing the first literature taking from the World Health Organization of 2020 states that people who don't have the disease but share other characteristics with this group also suffer from stigma. Also, it further discusses the discrimination experienced by the respondents. The author then used parenthetical in-text citation. They simply copied the actual statement of the World Health Organization for their source and place it after the paragraph, which is the World Health Organization of the 2020. On the next source, taken from He, J. et al. Of 2020, here the authors discusses the concept or ideas of discrimination experienced through verbal and discriminatory observable behaviors from the source. Here also, the authors use narrative in-text citation to recognize or give credit to the source. Moving on to the next example for the related study. In here, the authors use narrative in-text citation to further discuss the findings of the study. taken from Mantes of 2015 about the level of awareness on Anti-Bullying Act of secondary teachers in Malabog National High School, Daraga, Albay. On the next paragraph, show how the study of Mantes is related to the present study. If we are going to read it, the study is related to the present study because the findings of the previous study stated the common bullying incident encountered in Malabog National High School, Daraga, Albay. Bullying is a form of discrimination experienced and encountered. Moving on to the next example for the synthesis of the state of the art. Synthesis of the state of the art. Here, in the general statement, the authors give the purpose by stating the relation or relations of the various studies to their study. What you see here are the authors like Banot et al., Taday, Jensen, Vos, Alamo, Daet, Tagum, Gobot, Compos, Empig, Nakamura, Pigano, Ponsones, and Miller give emphasis on discrimination. So as you can see, all of these authors focus on discrimination, which the current author is synthesizing, or they combine these literatures with the same concept or with the same ideas. Furthermore, some of the literatures discussed are focused on the cause and effect of discrimination, which they explain in the next statement. Moving on to the next example for the gap bridge by the study. Under the gap bridge by the study, here, the authors discuss the study from Gubot and Empig of 2016 about discrimination in terms of racial perspectives, and as well as the study of Pensum of 2013, even after the discharge of the patient, there are still discrimination. Below is another study. The study of Nakamura, Pepano, and Ponsones of 2014, Jansen and Voss of 2021, and Garfin of 2015, all are focused on the discrimination to patients. Still, we are in the gap bridge by the study. For their last statement, all this study focuses on the sanctions, policies, and different forms of discrimination that is because of gender, ethnicity, diseases, and its management. But none of those studies focused on the discrimination experienced by the COVID-19 patients in Castilla, Sorsogon. This is the gap bridge by the study. So here they emphasize, it is actually their title of the study. Moving on to the next example for the theoretical framework. On this slide, under theoretical framework, here the authors provided theories that support their study. We have here the theory of Irving Goffman on social theory, and the other one is the cognitive psychology theory of Jean Piaget. And lastly, their third theory comes from Jerome Bruner. Here, the constructivist theory of Jerome Bruner states that constructivism is an approach that holds people actively construct or make their own knowledge, and that is reality is determined by the experiences of the learner. Okay guys, so all these theories made the research study form their theoretical framework. On these excerpts, here in this slide, is where their concluding part. Let me read it to you. All these theories help the study since this serves as the anchor on the flow of the research. So we have here the social stigma theory, the constructivists, and the cognitive theory. So therefore, instead of a negative interpretation from the discrimination experience, positive measures from the individual can be a re-echoed to the bigger circle of community can be done. Moving on to the next example for theoretical paradigm. In here, it is illustrated their theoretical paradigm. The three theories show the interconnectedness to their study. On this excerpt, we have here figure 1, theoretical paradigm. The theory for Irving Goffman's social stigma, discrediting other people through stigma that can input a negative impact to the individual, following the theory of Jerome Bruner and Jean Piaget. On Jerome Bruner's constructivist theory, the interpretation of input in one's mind depends on how the individual will perceive it. And on Jean Piaget, on cognitive theory, a good mindset equates better cognition, leading to a better and stable emotional and mental health. So all of this theory points the discrimination experienced by the COVID-19 patients of Castilla. Moving on to the next example for the conceptual framework. Here is an excerpt from the study of the Lodenko brothers, the illustration of their conceptual framework. So guys, let's dive into their research study under conceptual framework. On the first paragraph, they stated the aims and purpose of their study, which includes the socio-demographic profile of the key informants or the key respondents. It is based from their SOP1. It also explains the variables used and considered as their independent variable. On the second paragraph, they relate it to the second, third, fourth, and fifth SOP, or meaning related to the statement of the problem. On their last paragraph, they show the flow of ideas, facts, which the researchers wish to convey. Moving on to the next example for the conceptual paradigm. Here, the flow of the concept of their study was illustrated. So, it starts from the title down to the content of their statement of the problem. On this slide, figure 2, conceptual paradigm. Discrimination, this is the title, discrimination experienced by COVID-19 patients in Castilla, Sorsogon. Their SOP1, socio-demographic profile of the COVID-19 patients in terms of age, sex, civil status, occupation, length of stay in the hospital, and isolation facility or history of infection. Next, we have the forms of discrimination, the effects, the coping mechanism, and the lesson learned. On this slide is your rubrics for scoring your crafted chapter 2. Is your rubrics. Chapter 2 content, we have the related questions. Number 1, the learner are able to find suitable related literatures and studies. Number 2, the sources are reliable, valid, and relevant to the topic. Number 3, sentences of the concept are well organized and proper citation are evident. Number 4, clearly describes the gap bridged by the research study. Number 5, the theoretical framework is appropriate and well explained in relation to the current study. Number 6, the theoretical paradigm show creativity, illustrates theory used in the study. Number 7, the conceptual framework or frameworks clearly illustrates the relation of the variables used in the study. The scoring rubric will be excellent, good, fair, and poor. Along with this rubric is the comments and suggestions. Under the definition of terms, if you have some confusions with the terms used in this lesson, the definition of terms is provided. Here we have the foundational reviews, roadmap, and scholarly works. To continue with our definition of terms, we have the term state of knowledge, visual format, and stigma.
So that ends our lesson, and the reference for this material taken from the book or the books of Brian Edward Ludanko and John Stephen Ludanko of 2022 from Bicol University Department of Peace Studies, Daraga Albay, and some internet links or websites provided. Please do not forget to like, share, subscribe, click the notification bell, add comments on this video. Thank you very much. And for further information, the author is already here, the name, the address, and the purpose of this material. Thank you very much.